here up top. Okay, you got the Jackie Youngs, the Kelsey Mitchells. That's the Louis Vuitton store. We're replacing Kelsey. We're not replacing it with another Louis V item. Okay, we're not going quite to the bottom.
If the Indiana Fever make this move, it's not just a mistake. It could slam their championship window shut. Right now, there's a massive illusion gripping the WNBA fan base. Casual viewers look at the Fever roster and push for emotional continuity. They want the front office to hand Kelsey Mitchell a $1.4 million Supermax deal without hesitation. On the surface, it feels logical. She averages around 20 points per game, she's a familiar face, and she's been a key part of the team's identity. But that perspective ignores the cold reality of roster construction. This isn't about sentiment. This is about efficiency, flexibility, and long-term dominance. In a hard salary cap system, every dollar has to produce maximum value. Committing roughly 20% of your cap to a single player who thrives in isolation-heavy offense comes with serious risk. High scoring numbers don't always translate to high-impact winning basketball, especially if they come at the cost of ball movement, spacing, and overall team synergy. The modern game is about optimization. It's about building a system where talent amplifies talent, not one where it stagnates around a single scoring option. So instead of following the emotional narrative, the Fever front office has a far more strategic path available. Replace production, not the player. With the new CBA pushing the salary cap to around $7 million, the margins for error are actually tighter, not looser. A Supermax contract isn't just a payment, it's a constraint. It limits roster depth, reduces flexibility in free agency, and raises the stakes of every remaining move. Letting Mitchell walk wouldn't be corporate suicide. In the right framework, it could be a calculated financial reset, a chance to redistribute that $1.4 million across multiple high-efficiency contributors who better fit a modern ball-sharing system. Think of it as roster arbitrage. Instead of one high-usage scorer, you invest in multiple complementary pieces. Instead of isolation, you prioritize pace, spacing, and playmaking. Instead of predictability, you build adaptability and depth. And most importantly, you align everything around your franchise cornerstone, maximizing her strengths with the right ecosystem. This isn't about disrespecting Mitchell's talent. It's about understanding that in today's WNBA, value isn't defined by raw scoring. It's defined by impact per dollar. If Indiana chases emotion, they risk locking themselves into a rigid, top-heavy structure. But if they stay disciplined, they don't just survive free agency, they weaponize it.
Some options that we can put together. We can piece together 2 to 3 quality pieces to replace Kelsey Mitchell. She's going to command $1.4 million. I believe the Indiana Fever.
Listen carefully to the precision of that warning, because it cuts straight through the noise and into reality. If you commit that level of capital, you're not just signing a player, you're triggering a chain reaction. You're mathematically sacrificing your perimeter defensive depth. You're eliminating the flexibility needed to retain high-impact role players like Lexi Hull, whose value doesn't always show up in box scores, but is critical to winning basketball. You're also pricing yourself out of adding physical tone setters like Sophie Cunningham, players who bring edge, toughness, and emotional balance over a long season. That's how a roster quietly becomes fragile. A top-heavy structure might look powerful on paper, but over a demanding 52-game schedule, it cracks. Fatigue sets in, matchups get exploited, depth gets exposed, and suddenly, what looked like star power turns into structural weakness. Building a real contender, let alone a multi-year dynasty, requires discipline that most fan bases don't want to hear. You have to detach from emotion and commit fully to the numbers, because the truth is simple. You don't replace 20 points per game with one expensive name.
Now, all these people here up top. Okay, you got the Jackie Youngs, the Kelsey Mitchells. That's the Louis Vuitton store. We're replacing Kelsey. We're not replacing it with another Louis V item. Okay, we're not going quite to the bottom.
Listen closely to the clarity of that analogy, because it captures the entire strategy. When you lose a max tier asset, your first move cannot be to panic and replace it with another max tier name. That's how organizations trap themselves. You don't walk into the luxury aisle and casually drop $1.4 million on Jackie Young just to satisfy public pressure. And on the other end, you don't swing too far in the opposite direction and fill your roster with low-impact, unproven pieces that can't survive meaningful minutes. The winning move lives in the middle. You have to shop with precision in the most efficient tier of the market, the undervalued middle class. That's where smart front offices separate themselves. Start at the top of that tier. You're looking at proven, high-impact two-way players like Ariel Atkins and Gabby Williams. These are elite assets. Atkins brings perimeter scoring with championship-level reliability, while Williams offers defensive versatility, disruption, and international experience that translates across systems. They immediately raise your defensive floor instantly. But let's stay disciplined. These players aren't bargains. They're going to command strong upper-middle tier contracts, likely in the range of $750,000. That's the trade-off. Elite quality, but limited quantity. If you invest at that level, you're essentially allocating the equivalent of Kelsey Mitchell's max slot into one premium two-way upgrade, plus minimal depth behind it. Yes, you improve defensively, but you still haven't solved the structural issue created by a longer, more demanding schedule. Depth remains fragile, and that's the trap. To truly unlock the system, especially when you're building around Caitlin Clark, you can't stop at premium names. You have to go deeper. You have to identify role players whose specific skill sets align perfectly with pace, spacing, and transition offense. That's where real efficiency lives. The goal isn't just to replace talent, it's to multiply impact across the roster. You're looking for players who run the floor relentlessly, defend multiple positions, space the court without needing high usage, and make quick, high IQ decisions in transition. When you stack enough of those profiles together,
probably gonna be about half of that based on this, so you could get a Bridget Carlton from in the 600K range. Okay, you could probably get Bridget Carlton for the 550, 600K. You probably can land a Bridget Carlton if she's a.
Listen carefully to the raw financial efficiency behind this projection, because this is where strategy turns into real advantage. Start with the fit. Bridget Carlton is not just a replacement piece, she's a system amplifier. At 6'1", she brings elite size for a guard wing, along with defensive versatility and high IQ decision-making. Last season, she operated on a suppressed $125,000 contract, quietly thriving in a low-usage role alongside stars like Nafisa Collier and Kayla McBride. That matters. Carlton doesn't need touches to impact the game. She spaces the floor, reads defenses instantly, and punishes rotations. In a system led by Caitlin Clark, that skill set becomes lethal. When Clark collapses defenses in transition or off the dribble, Carlton is exactly where she needs to be, ready to convert high-efficiency catch-and-shoot threes. And defensively, she provides a level of stability and versatility that Kelsey Mitchell simply doesn't. At an estimated $600,000 market value, you're not just acquiring a perfect tactical fit, you're generating roughly $800,000 in cap savings compared to a supermax. That's not a downgrade, that's leverage. Now you reinvest. Enter Ray Burrell, a high-variance, high-upside restricted free agent currently stuck in an unstable system with the Sparks. Her production has been inconsistent, but context matters. Without elite guard play, her strengths, speed, transition finishing, and open floor athleticism have been underutilized. That's exactly why she's valuable. Burrell is a pure transition weapon. She doesn't need isolation touches or complex sets. Pair her with Clark, and her role becomes simple: sprint, receive, finish. In the open floor, that combination can become one of the most dangerous vertical threats in the league. Because her market value is artificially suppressed, you can likely secure her on a team-friendly deal, extracting massive upside at minimal cost. Now you've added an elite spot-up shooter, Carlton, a high-speed transition wing, Burrell, an interior presence. When remaining cap flexibility, you target a mobile interior presence, someone who can run, finish, and protect the glass. A young, athletic option like Letitia Amihir offers upside and energy, while a veteran like Temi Fagbenle brings proven production, rebounding, and familiarity with an up-tempo system. Fagbenle, in particular, already understands how to operate in a fast-paced offensive environment. She runs the floor, finishes efficiently, and provides critical interior stability in short bursts, exactly what this roster needs. And here's where the full picture locks in. Instead of allocating $1.4 million to a single high-usage scorer, you've secured a perfect-fit two-way wing, added elite transition speed, reinforced your interior rotation, preserved depth, flexibility, and defensive integrity. This isn't just roster building, it's resource optimization at the highest level. You didn't replace one player, you built an ecosystem. And that's where the real competitive advantage emerges.
Ariel Atkins and a Bridget Carlton, or a Bridget Carlton, Ray Burrell, and a Timmy Fag-Benley, 3 for the price of 1 of Kelsey Mitchell. I think you have to look at these things, and I believe it's a move that the Indiana Fever need to look to.
Let that calculation settle in, because this is what elite roster construction actually looks like when emotion is removed from the equation. This is the blueprint. You don't allocate $1.4 million to Kelsey Mitchell for high-volume isolation scoring. You reset the ledger. You convert that single restrictive investment into 3 scalable, system-aligned assets: Bridget Carlton, Ray Burrell, and Timmy Fag-Benley, all within the same financial bandwidth. That's not just a swap, that's structural transformation. Instead of one usage-heavy scorer, you rebuild your perimeter defense, add transition speed and athleticism, increase lineup flexibility, create depth capable of surviving a 52-game grind. At the same time, you preserve the financial space needed to retain critical complementary pieces like Lexi Hull and Sophie Cunningham, players who reinforce identity, toughness, and defensive consistency. Most importantly, you build the correct ecosystem around your core, Caitlin Clark and Aliyah Boston. That's the real objective. Not headlines, not sentiment, not short-term approval. Sustainable dominance. This is where top front offices separate themselves from the rest. They don't react to pressure, they don't chase names, and they absolutely don't walk into expensive veterans in that upper tier that replicate the same cap constraints under a different label. Because, make no mistake, overcommitting to expensive veterans in that upper tier doesn't solve the problem. It just reshapes it. You're still locked into a rigid structure, still sacrificing depth, still vulnerable over a long season. The disciplined approach is different. Target fit over fame. Prioritize efficiency over volume. Build layers, not bottlenecks. If executed correctly, this strategy doesn't just keep Indiana competitive, it elevates them into a different tier entirely. A roster built on pace, spacing, and unselfish play becomes incredibly difficult to defend over 48 minutes, let alone across a full season. And in that scenario, teams like the New York Liberty or Connecticut Sun aren't just facing star power, they're dealing with relentless depth, constant pressure, and systemic efficiency. But the margin for error is razor thin. If Indiana leans into emotion, if they commit that full supermax and lock themselves into a top-heavy structure, they risk closing their own window before it fully opens. Depth erodes, flexibility disappears, and over time, the cracks show, especially in the playoffs, where fatigue and matchups expose every imbalance. This is the decision point. One offseason, one direction. Either you execute a calculated, potentially unpopular strategy that maximizes long-term upside, or you follow the noise and accept the limitations that come with it. That's the reality of the modern WNBA landscape, where expansion, rising salaries, and increased competition leave no room for hesitation. So now the question becomes simple. Will Indiana operate with discipline or emotion? Because the answer to that question doesn't just shape their roster, it defines their future.